In this video, we explore the process of finding the overlapping events booked in a music hall. Hello, I am Jagan from Grow with Data. I am posting this video to share my knowledge in SQL language with you. If this assists you in interview preparation anyways, I will be happy. Let's see the data set and we can talk about the questions in detail. So we are given a table HallEvents which has a data of each hall ID and start and end date of the booking. It's basically you think as a music hall and there are bookings happening on a particular day. So we have to find a solution to merge all the overlapping events that are held in the same hall. Two events are overlap if they have at least one day in common. Return the result in the expected order. First we create the table and I can show you the expected result. Okay. So with this data we want to bring in the overlaps here. For example, if you see the data set for hall 1, the start date is 2023 Jan 13 to 14. The second booking is on 14 to 17. So if you see the overlap, 2023 0114 is the overlap. So when you merge the overlap, what happens for hall 1? It starts with Jan 13 to ends in Jan 17 is one piece and then 18 to 25 is the other piece. So the second record will got merged, right? So this will got merged to the first one. So the output is going to be 13 to 17 and then it's going to be 18 and 25. If we see for hall 2, the first booking is for 22/12/9 to 12/23. The second booking is from 12/13 to 17, which is like a subset of the first booking. So when you see the overlap, the output has to be from 12/9 to 12/23. So this is what is shown here. For hall 3, there is only one record and we are not looking into the overlap. So the expected output is going to be, for every hall you see what is the overlap, you merge the overlap and then you give the result as the end-to-end package. Okay, so the start to end date should be, the start date should be the minimum of it, the end date should be the maximum of the overlap part, and then if there is no overlap you just display that as the given start and end date. Okay, so how to do that? Let's start with the Windows function. Okay, let's comment this out. In our previous video we talked about few Windows options, right? We have row number, dense rank, and lately we saw lead and lag, right? Let's start with the lead and lag option. So what will the lag function do? Let's see. From HallEvents, right? So we have hall ID, start day, end day. So this is the given data, right? So we have the hall ID, we have the start date and the end date. If you want to take the lag function of, you can say end date, okay, end day and 1. So one record before the current record, right, over partition by hall ID. So every hall ID and then no need for comma, order by, you can say hall ID is not required but that's okay, start day comma end day as check, you can just give a check. Okay, when you have a lag function, what will the lag function do? It will take the current record and go to one record previous to it based on hall ID, start day and end day. We order based on the 3 columns and then look for any column before this, one record before this. Since this is the first record, we don't have any record before this, so the lag function will return null. For the second record, for Jan 14 to 17, the previous record is the first one. So it takes the end day from the previous record and it brings up here. And for third one, the previous record is the second record. So it takes the 0117 and put that in the lag. Same thing for the second Hall. So first one don't have a previous record, the second one got 1223 as the previous record, it brings it here. For third there is no record. So if you change this lag function to 2, right, it will look for the second previous record. So the first record don't have a previous record, the second record have only one previous record, the third record got the second previous record, which is 114, which is here. So the lag function, you can specify how many records you have to go behind. For lead function, the same thing, but it will look forward, right? The lead function will go and look forward, right? So the first record got 2 records before, 25, it brings it here. The second and third don't have the second record after this, right? 17 has only one record, the 25 has no records. So all the records are having null value because they don't have the second next record, right, the future records. So that's how the lead and lag function work. But now what we need is, for this particular record, we get one record and you get the maximum of the end date from all the previous record before that Hall ID, right? If for first record there is no previous record, but for the second record you find all the records. If there are 10 records, look for all the 10 records, what is going to be the maximum of end date. For third record you look for all the previous records, there is no limit. Here for lead and lag we put the limit of one, first record and second record. So what if I need all the records before for that particular Hall ID? How to do that? I am going to introduce one more Windows function. It's same like the lag part of it, but a small change to it. So what we do, we have the Hall ID, start date and end date. We get the maximum of the end date over, you get the partition by Hall ID, order by the Hall ID, start date and end date, and then we just say rows between unbounded preceding and one preceding. So you can just take this way. So here you partition by the Hall ID and then you order by the Hall ID, start date and end date, okay, and there is something called the rows between unbounded preceding and one preceding. That means you start from the first record, there is no restriction for it. So whatever be the first record for that partition, right, you go to the first record and go till the previous record. So whatever the record is, go till the previous record. If you run this, you get the previous records. So if you see the first record, there is no previous record, right? So you don't consider that, it just shows null. For the second one, the only previous record is 14, so it gets the max of it. For the third record, out of 14 and 17, the max of end date is 17. Same thing for Hall 2 and Hall 3, there is no record, so it just shows us null. Even if there are 100 records before 117, out of the 100 records, it will just get the maximum end date between the 100 previous records. So that is the power of unbounded preceding and one preceding. It's based on the partition you give, right? So if you don't give the partition, then it will bring in all the records in that table, okay? So we are so specific for the Hall ID, so we partition based on the Hall ID. This is the very key for our example, okay? So what we are going to do is, we are going to consider this logic and we are going to build our SQL, okay? So we are going to have the start date, end date for the Hall ID, and then we just say case when we have the max of end date, right? So we are going to use that case when start day is greater than this max of end date. Where is the bracket? Okay. So we have the start date, right? If the start date is greater than the end date, right, that means there is no overlap, right? So the end date is ends before the start date, that means there is no overlap. If not, like start date falls before the end date, that means there is a overlap, right? So from HallEvents, so when you run this, so when you have case when the start date is greater than the max of end date, then 1 else 0 end as is a indicator. Okay. So we just start with the first condition. If you see this, it will check for the start date, it will look for the previous end dates, all the unpreceding and one preceding conditions, right? Check all the previous date, check for the end date. There is no record, so it is 0. And it check for the next one, is this start date greater than the one? No, it's greater than or equal to, right? So it brings here. And if you go with the 18, it checks for the previous one, it's greater than, right? The start date is greater than, so it brings here. So if it's greater than means a new record, there is no overlap. You can clearly say the 17 and this 18, there is no overlap, so it's a different record. But if you see this, the 23 and the 13, it can't say it's greater than, so we still have 0. So we have to address the overlapping part. So what we do, if there is no record before, right, then we can say it's a new record. So how will you say it? If you say 0, that means there is a overlap, provided if there is no record before, right? For the first one, there is no previous record, that means it should be a new one. But our current condition will check only if the start date is greater than the end date. So 17 is done, right? The 17th is yesterday and 18 is today, that means it's a new day, there is no overlap, then it's 1, fine. But if there is no previous record, for this one there is no previous record, so this is going to be the start of it. So how will I flag this? So we just say start date is greater than end date, or your max of end day over partition by all this part, right, is null. Then you can say, so here for the first record, if you find the max of the previous end day, it's null, right? When you see here, it's null. So if it's a null, then it's a new record, so you go with it. So we find two starting point. One is if there is no overlap, that means the previous end date is less than the start date, so it's a purely distinguish between that day is done, that booking is done, this is a new booking, so this is a flag as 1. If there is a overlap, we just put it as 0. The second condition is if there is no record before, this is the first record, then the maximum of end date is null, so we address that in the second condition. If it's a null, flag it as a starting point. If the start date is greater than the end date, then flag it as a new booking, right? If not, 0. 0 means there is a overlap. If you see this, the 14 and the end date 14, there is a overlap. If you see this record, the starting point is within the end date, so the 0, it's a overlap. So 0 means overlap, 1 is there is no overlap. So we got this as a clear flag, right, with flag overlaps as, so we flag all the bookings with whether we have a overlap or not. Now what we are going to do is we are going to create a grouping overlap. We just say how to group that there is a overlap, right? How will you group it? We did in one previous video, I'm not sure which one it is. We did the same thing, but we can just start again. Select hall ID, start day, end day, and then sum of the indicator. You just put as a, we are going to int, right? We are going to use the Windows function over partition by hall ID, because we have the hall ID. And in the previous video we talked about what is the importance of order by, right? Let's do this. Sum of indicator from the flag overlaps. So what we are trying to do is, we are going to create a column which shows the grouping of overlaps. For example, if you run this code, it just says hall overview, start end date, partition by hall ID as some indicator from flag overlaps. Table doesn't exist. HallEvents. Okay. Let's see if you miss something here. Okay, I think it's timed out. Let's create the table again. Oops. Okay, we created the table. Let's comment this out. Now you run this. Okay. Okay, so now if you see, you sum up the indicator, right? So the indicator, you can see 1, 0, 1 kind of thing, right? So if you do sum of the indicator, it will sum up the whole indicator for that hall ID. But I want to have a cumulative sum. I just want to group it. So what I will do is order by hall ID, start day, end day. So now you know the importance of the order by. Remember, if you do the start date, then it's going to increment the sum. You will take the first record and then it adds up to the indicator for the second record and then go third. So if you see this, it will be 1, 0, 1, right? So it will take 1, then it adds to the second one, 1 plus 0 is 1, and the third one, 1 plus 1 is 2, and for the second hall it's 1, 1 plus 0 is 1, and then third one it's 1. So it's 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, right? Okay. Okay. So that's why you got 1, 1, 2, 1, 1 and 1. Okay. So the importance of the order by is, it will give you the cumulative sum, not the overall sum. That's what we need. Now if you see, whatever the 1 part is, right, it's a set, it's a overlapping part. So 13 to 14, 14 to 17, it groups by 1, and the second one 2 is a separate one, and for this 1 and 1 for this hall there is a overlap, and then this is a separate one. Now if you see the sum of indicator, it gives you a key saying that yes, we are grouped into one number. 1 and 1, that's a overlap, and then 2 separate. So we are going to use this as a key column for our grouping. Just say PAANG grouping overlap as, so we got the indicator as a grouping part of it. Now we are going to use that as our key thing. Select hall ID. Now we say the minimum of start day as start day, and then maximum of end day as the end day. From the output we have group by the first one, and then if you indicate, use the sum of indicator, that's the key, right? Sum of indicator, you can just give the column as hall ID if you want to. If not, you can just give 1 because it's the first column, and then you say order by hall ID, which is 1, and then the start date, which is 2. So when you run this, it will take the first 2 records, right? The 13, 14, 14 to 17, right? It takes the first 2 records. The minimum of start date is 113, the maximum of end date is 117. So these 2 records will be overlapped when you group based on hall ID and the sum of indicator. And the second record is only 1, so the maximum minimum is going to be the same, and then you group by 1 and 2, it's okay. For the second hall, the minimum of start date is 12/9, the maximum of end date is 12/17. So the overlap, so 12/23, right? So the overlap will be taken care when you group by hall ID and the sum of indicator. Third one is a single record, so it's okay. So it will get clearly the expected output. So 1, 1, 2 and 3, you get this. So the key point here is how will you make the previous records? How will you get the maximum of end date based on the keyword unbounded preceding and one preceding? So that's the key, and then we just check the start date is greater than the maximum date or the maximum date is null, right? So that maximum date is null is the first record, and then use that you create a indicator, the cumulative sum, right? And then use that for the grouping part of it based on the hall ID and the cumulative sum. You take the min and max of the start and end date respectively, and you get the overlapping part. So this problem can be used for similar overlapping questions like the hall numbers, the booking of hotels, all this cumulative part, you can use the same logic. Only thing is the Windows function, you have to know the condition, how to get the overlap based on the start date and the end date, unbounded preceding and the one preceding, how that works. It will take all the previous record from 1 till the previous record, and then it brings the maximum of end date, or it should be the first record of that series. If you know, if you can understand this, the other things are the same. The Windows function for the sum of indicator, if you have the order by, it will take you to the cumulative sum. If you remove the order by, it will just do the overall sum for the hall ID. So that's the second key part of it. And then min and max, you are normally know it, right? So it will give you the overlap. Only key part is you group based on the hall ID and the sum of indicator. If you remove the sum of indicator, then you are not going to get the expected overlap. So you make sure you include the sum of indicator, and then you group by, get the overlapping date. Hope you like this video. Thanks for watching.